Okay, so we have a really interesting and special guest today in the podcast in regarding to the Steve McNair case. This gentleman we're talking to today, Vincent Hill, was a police officer and also a private investigator who took it upon himself to look into this case. He didn't, anybody knows anything about the Steve McNair case, technically they say, law enforcement say is solved, but it's not solved. We don't feel it's solved. I mean, we do these, to me, it's like a cold case status right now. That's the way we classify it as after doing all the research and stuff like that. But Vincent, thank you for being on the podcast. Want to really kind of dive right into this. Tell the audience, tell us how you got involved in this case, and you've written 2 books about the case. So obviously it's something in your psyche that's not going away, that you feel like there's so many more answers that need to be, that you have to kind of come up with. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in this case, and what does this all mean to you?
Well, it means everything, right? Here we are 16 years later from when Steve and Jenny were shot and killed in Nashville, Tennessee. Just to give you a little history about myself, I was a Nashville police officer up until a couple years before Steve was killed. And I remember when I first heard what happened, I can tell you where I was. I was in the shower getting ready to go to a Nashville Sounds baseball game. A friend calls me and they said Steve was killed. I'm like, Steve who? And it's Steve McNair. I'm like, yeah, sure. So turned on the TV. Sure enough, there's news, there's people gathered around this condo in Nashville, Tennessee. And then when I heard that there was a young lady also found with Steve, the first thing that came to mind was upset boyfriend, upset wife, something nefarious of that nature. And then, within a matter of days, my former department said it was a murder-suicide. And I just thought, okay, something's not right about this, especially when they said Steve McNair was shot once in each temple, twice in the chest, and supposedly by a 20-year-old female that purchased the gun just a couple of hours before these murders. That just didn't make sense to me. So I started digging into a lot of things, which is actually what sprung me to get my private investigator license in Tennessee, was to look into the Steve McNair case. And, just started digging and digging and digging. And the more I dug, the more holes I actually found in the investigation.
So how long were you on the Nashville Police Department?
So I was on just under 5 years. I went straight from the Army straight to the Nashville Police Department. I left in 2006, I believe, September of 2006. Now, I left because I was raising my daughter, who was 10 at the time. I can't believe I almost have a 30-year-old, but I was raising my daughter by myself at the time. There were some issues going on with me and my current wife. She moved out. My daughter moved in. So, as a cop working 3 to 11, it's not really conducive to have a 10-year-old daughter at home at the same time. Now, the department will tell you I left because I was being investigated for a pursuit where that involved a crash. But, if you look at the paperwork, I was nowhere around when that crash happened. I'd already turned around and was back at the station, but they said my actions led to that crash and blah, blah, blah. So, the department has done what it can to try to smear my image, but, I can go back and pull the countless times I was officer of the month. I can go back and pull the Chiefs coins, that I've received. But, again, when you're questioning a department's quote unquote conclusion of a case and calling them out on their bullshit, of course, the only thing they can try to do is smear your name.
And I'm sure that happened after you started looking into this.
Yes, absolutely.
So you became a private investigator because of this case. That's what I was reading.
Yes. Absolutely. That was the only reason. I had reached out to Steve's mother, Lucille McNair. I met her about a year after it happened and sat on her front porch. Well, her previous front porch before that house got sold, but that's a different story. And I told her, I said, listen, I don't believe Jenny Kazemi killed Steve. She said, I don't believe it either. I said, well, I won't stop until I get you answers. And, again, here we are 16 years later. So that's when I decided to go get my private investigator license. I charged Steve McNair $1. And I said, this is what I will always charge you, just this $1. You'll never have to worry about me charging you one more thing. She gave me 4 quarters. I got back to Nashville. I literally went to SunTrust Bank, which is where my business account was, and deposited those 4 quarters. So for me, it's never been about money. It's just been about getting to the truth of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and especially meeting with her, and then immediately she knows in her heart, like she knew immediately that that's not what happened. And just from looking at the documents, first of all, how does a 20-year-old who's never shot a gun make those precise gunshot wounds? I went to gun training with him, and I still could not make any kind of precise gunshot.
And that's what, like 3 hours of training.
Like a lot of training. And that's, if she was afraid of guns from what it sounded like from her friends, and she's 20 years old, there was a lot of gunshot wounds on that man. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that don't make sense.
Yeah, a lot of things that don't make sense. I mean, listen, being former military, former police, yes, I was around guns. But to convince me that a 20-year-old who supposedly, again, and we can definitely dive into the gun and why there was never a gun in Jenny's hands for sure. But to convince someone that a 20-year-old who supposedly bought a gun at 6 o'clock, 6 hours before this murder, then had enough confidence, enough skill to put 1 in each temple, twice in the chest with a very tight shot group. She doesn't know how to rack around in this thing. She doesn't know how to clear a jam in this thing. There are a whole plethora of things that could have gone wrong if she would have done this. Now, if they would have said there were like 13 shots scattered against the walls in the apartment, I might believe it. But to tell me that she shot this guy once in each temple, twice in the chest, and mind you, one of the entry wounds to the temple was at an upward angle. So that doesn't even make sense if she's standing over Steve while he's on the couch. So if anybody would believe that, that's, you may as well believe in Santa Claus.
Yeah. So at what point did you realize that you felt like there was foul play involved? Like, was it like how many days after him dying? I mean, what prompted you to really kind of dig your heels in and just say, this stinks?
Well, I think, the night it happened, again, I can remember it like it was yesterday. When they gave the initial press conference later that night and said there was, Steve and a female companion, I think it's what they called her, found dead. I'm like, okay, so you telling me you're going to question a husband, a boyfriend, a wife, something. But by Wednesday, when they said it was a murder-suicide and that allegedly Jenny got a DUI on Wednesday night, she bought a gun Thursday, and she was spiraling out of control because of this DUI, that she killed Steve. Like, that makes zero sense. How many people on this planet have gotten a DUI? They didn't go out and kill someone and then kill themselves, right? So it just didn't really make sense. And then, when they started saying how Steve was shot and this story of a guy she never met who sold her a gun, that's when I said, wait a minute. So this guy who Nashville police didn't even know at the time was a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery. So you mean to tell me a guy who doesn't know this female is just going to, who's, by the way, a convicted felon for murder and armed robbery? Oh yeah, I'll sell you a gun. I don't know if you're the police. I don't know if you're the feds, but sure, I'll sell you a gun because I'm desperate for $100. Like, what are you going to get with $100? Even in 2009, $100 is only going to take you so far. So when I heard that, it was just like, okay, well, that makes no sense, right? This guy that doesn't know her, she goes to him because supposedly he was going to help her sell her car. Oh yeah, I can sell you a gun. Well, here's the thing. Steve had guns. Jenny knew where Steve's guns were. Steve's gun was found at the condo. She never needed to involve an Adrian Gilliam to buy a gun if she wanted to kill her boyfriend that she was worried was leaving her.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to, and we're going to kind of dive into all this stuff a little deeper. One of the things I thought was interesting is because you talk about the DUI, and I believe there is a video of her DUI, correct?
Yeah, so there's video. The DUI would have been Wednesday, which I think is July 1st. I'd have to do the math. She was stopped by Sean Taylor, who I know personally because he actually trained us to do DUI when I was at the academy. And he's the same officer that arrested Steve for his first DUI. And while I was at the academy, he would always joke that he was going to get Steve because he knew what bars he hung out and all of this stuff. And, you know, even as a rookie, if you will, in the academy, I'm like, why would you do that, Sean? Like, he's our star quarterback. You know, we're making decent money because the Titans are here in Nashville. But he always, for whatever reason, had this vendetta against Steve. And Steve beat his first DUI because, you know, Sean Taylor was stupid enough to go around showing the video to people, and it got tainted in court. But if you look back at that DUI of Jenny back on that Wednesday, you know, there's video. All the DUI cars have cameras in them. So Sean stops them, pulls them over, goes back to his car, calls his buddy. He's like, hey, remember that truck I stopped 2 weeks ago? Yeah, I got her again, and guess who's with her? So Sean already knew that truck was in Steve and Jenny's name. So again, he was looking for Steve to get a DUI. Then Sean goes on to say, well, and then he stops himself. Well, he's drunk as hell. She's not, but I'm going to get her out anyway. So that tells me she was not intoxicated. Then if you go watch her field sobriety test, she passes those. But she's arrested for DUI because Sean had this personal vendetta against Steve McNair. It's documented. Go look it up. So in the back of the car, again, it's recorded, video, audio. Jenny's just joking with him. Like, oh, didn't you stop me a couple of weeks ago? Which verifies what he said during that phone call. Yeah. Oh, what's your name? Sean Taylor. Oh, Sean, what days do you work? I work these days. Well, I'll make sure I'm not driving when you're here working. Ha, 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 boom, boom, boom. They're laughing. They're joking like, oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So she says, oh, I've seen this in the movies. I know what this is. I've seen this in movies. You're going to rape me, aren't you? I'm scared. So what do Nashville police do during their investigation when they release the DUI? Show that one little clip. I'm scared. Oh, she was spiraling out of control. She was so worried about this DUI. But if you add everything into context, she was joking about it. You know why? Because she knew in an hour she was going to be out because Steve was already headed to the bondsman that, again, I know personally, who bonded her out. She was in jail for an hour. And if you go back and watch the jail tapes, she's in there doing some girl's hair, laughing and joking. So to tell the world that she was worried about this DUI and it made her snap is pure bullshit because there's no proof of that. The evidence is right there. She was not concerned with this DUI. Like, she knew Steve was going to get her out. She's joking with Sean, who stopped her 2 weeks before because he knew that was Steve's truck. So he was looking to get Steve another DUI because he beat the first DUI. But she just became a victim of Sean's bullshit. Plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even imagine that a 20-year-old who works in a bar is going to be distraught enough after getting a DUI, which most people that I worked with at bars got DUIs,
right,
that she was going to go commit homicide. Can we just kind of roll back for a second? I just want people to understand who Jenny is, what her relationship was to Steve, and who, for those who don't know, who Steve was, because he was, you know, an icon in the NFL. He was, you know, very famous. And in this small town in Nashville, it seemed like he'd already accumulated some people that were envious possibly or had issues with him.
Yeah. So Jenny had just turned 20 years old right before this happened. I believe in May. Of course, they died July 4th. So, I mean, she was a typical 20-year-old, right? She had an apartment with a roommate. She worked at Dave & Buster's, as a server at Dave & Buster's. She's dating this guy who's got NFL fame. So, of course, she's excited about, the trips that she's taking with him, as any 20-year-old would be, right? But again, just a typical jovial, bubbly, silly 20-year-old female who wanted to live life. She ends up meeting Steve like around Christmas time of 2008 at Dave & Buster's when Steve was there with family and friends. According to her friend, she didn't even know who Steve was. Steve gives the number and, his name, and she goes home and like, hey, I met a guy named Steve McNair. And they're like, do you know who that is? Right. So Steve to Nashville was everything. Again, like the Titans moved to Nashville, brought so much notoriety to that city outside of just country music, right? Which what it was known for then, like, wow, we have a football team. Wow. We have this star quarterback that almost got us to the Super Bowl. So to Nashville, Steve was everything. And even after retirement, people flocked to Steve. He started, a restaurant, Gridiron 9, to stay in the community. So Steve McNair, was that guy. Now, again, if you didn't know Steve played in the NFL, you wouldn't know he was, of money, if you will, because that just wasn't Steve's persona to walk around and, flashy and all of this stuff, because he had humble upbringings. But, Steve was an icon to the city of Nashville.
And he was married at the time when he met Jenny.
Yes, Steve was married when he met Jenny. Yes.
How long was he with his wife?
That I'm not sure. I know they met, I believe, while he was still at Alcorn State. So, he at least was with Michelle for quite a while. I just, off the top of my head, can't remember exactly when they got married.
That's okay. But it did seem like it was for a long time, like since college. And it seemed also from the research that I did that they were very open about this affair that he was having. And it wasn't just Jenny, it was multiple people. And I think that's maybe part of the culture in the NFL, but it wasn't like Michelle didn't know that he was out with other women.
Well, I don't know if I'd say open. I would probably say, like, as a guy that's been married twice, if your marriage is not as buckled up as people assume it is or think it is, you may not care that people know that you have a girlfriend on the side, right? Because otherwise, why wouldn't you, especially a man of that status? Steve wasn't working at McDonald's. He wasn't a server. He had millions. He knew what was at risk, at stake, if Michelle found out. So why would you not try to keep that buttoned up if your marriage itself was probably on the fence?
Yeah, that's what I was assuming, is that they obviously were having problems, because you wouldn't be out there with a young girl like this if you were worried about your wife finding out. Maybe he wanted her to find out.
Maybe,
yeah. Now, as far as the Nashville Police Department, now we're very pro-police. I mean, we have a lot of, we have friends, family that are in police, but they're human, and and because they're human, they get things wrong, and there's a lot of things that can kind of to contribute to that. And sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's just they just don't want to deal with it, and as we all know, that law enforcement and the law is all about finality, and they want resolution. And because Steve McNair was such a high profile figure, and this when he was found dead, it wasn't just national, it was international story. They knew that they needed to kind of move fast. Now, I'm sure you have, and you told us in previous conversation before we started this interview, that you still have people that that were on the force or still in the force, who have left the force, and that felt like the investigation was rushed. And because, we deal with murder investigations all the time, interview law enforcement. And I think it was like a 4 or 5 day investigation before they ruled this a murder, suicide,
Right.
That's not even time for the forensics to come back, the ballistics to come back. I mean, the autopsy, it's like, you can't do a medical examiner's report in 4 or 5 days. So
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? And why do you think there was such a rush to wrap this thing up?
Well, I think quite simply, and we've heard this phrase, Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is probably the best one. The simplest answer was you had Steve dead, you had Jenny dead. There's a gun somewhere in the condo. It's Steve McNair. It's not Willie Johnson. It's not, Michael Williams, somebody that no one knows. It's Steve McNair. You got hundreds of people literally right outside that condo that day. Let's call it a murder-suicide, put a bow on it, wrap it up, be done with it. But the problem is all of that came back to bite them once they started getting phone records and once Adrian Gilliam's alibi did not check out, which I'm sure we'll get into. So it was just that day, essentially, let's just call this a murder-suicide. And the reason I say that, here's the official offense report from that day written by Charles Robinson, that at 1300 hours, which is before the call came in, by the way, it's a very short narrative that just says, according to a witness arrived at the condo at approximately 1300 hours, found both victims shot in the living room. Victim number 1 suffered multiple gunshot wounds. That would be Steve to the chest and head. Victim number 2 appeared to have a single gunshot wound to the head. Handgun was recovered near the victim's body. And that's the entire narrative in that report that's written that day, right? So they already had it in their mind that, let's just call this a murder-suicide, wrap it up. No ballistics, no TBI report, no gunshot residue report, no interviews, no nothing. Let's just call this a murder-suicide on that day. Because, again, it's Steve McNair. We got to wrap this up quick.
Yeah, that's troubling. That's troubling. I mean, I'm sure that was like a huge red flag for you when you started looking into this case. That was just like, because no one, unless you have someone who's basically, you actually see him on videotape doing it, or they admit to it.
Right.
Just recently, the horrible shooting that happened in Manhattan this week. They're still investigating that. Right. So it's like they already know who did it. It was a murder-suicide. That investigation will probably take a few months before they roll everything out. Even though we know what we saw and what they're telling us and the victims, they're still going to investigate it. They're going to, I'm sure they're going to do an autopsy on the killer. They're going to do all that stuff has to be done. It's not going to get done in 5 days.
No, not at all. You have to go back and look at a motive. You have to go trace his movements. You have to trace where the gun came from. There's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do in an investigation, especially when you're talking about 2 bodies on the floor, right? How many times have we seen something that was originally considered a murder-suicide, and then, this really wasn't a murder-suicide? And it's not inconceivable to think that at 5'2", 90 pounds soaking wet, which Jenny was, that somebody could easily overpower her and manipulate putting a gun in her hand. It's not that hard to conceive that, i.e., that could be why she had carpet rash on the left side of her body. And, again, we've seen it. It happens, and she's this big. It's not that hard to conceive that.
No, not at all. To me, the first thing when I was reading this was absolutely not possible. At 20 years old, who's never handled a gun, like I said, when we went and I handled a gun in my 30s, and as an adult, when you're 19 years old, 20 years old, never handled a gun, you're going to be able to pull something like this off? I don't believe that at all.
Right.
That's ridiculous. And
Right.
I get it. You know, he's a famous icon. They panic. They want to close it. They want to answer. They got to answer to all these people outside the door. It's upsetting for his family, her family, their friends. You know, they're lucky that they had you to come in and see the red flags immediately and be like, this something's not right.
Yeah.
And just so from there, let's talk about the person that found Steve and Jenny, because I think that that's key to this whole situation here.
Yeah. So Wayne Neely, who was some business associate with Steve, I don't know if I would call him a friend. Maybe they were friends, but he owned the sporting goods store that Steve would frequent. So that's how he and Steve built that relationship. So the condo was actually in he and Steve's name. Now his story is, again, it's his story, that he had been trying to get a hold of Steve because of some charity softball or baseball event that was happening later that day. He's calling Steve. He's calling Steve. Steve's not answering. So he decides to drive to the condo. Well, red flag number one is, why would you think Steve's at the condo versus the house with his wife that's like 3 miles away? So that's red flag number one. So he says he walks in, it's broad daylight. He walks straight past these two dead bodies into the refrigerator, gets a beer, turns around. All of a sudden he sees Steve on the couch in blood and shell casings. So he says he picks up a shell casing.
Hold on a second. He walked into the condo, past them, to the refrigerator in the kitchen.
This is what Wayne Neely said happened. So
and didn't notice
again,
that they were on.
So again, you got a question. Okay, now I can remember. Again, I can remember that day, and I had the weather reports and everything else because I like to investigate stuff. I remember that day. It did rain, but it didn't rain until hours after Steve and Jenny were found because I was at the Sounds game with my son when it actually started raining. So to tell me that you walked into a place at 1 p.m. and you didn't see these two bodies, one on the couch, one on the floor, all this blood, all these shell casings, it tells me the blinds were closed, and it also tells me the lights were out because how else are you not going to see this? That you get all the way to the kitchen, turn the light on in there, get a beer, and then all of a sudden you see this. So if the lights were out, we also have another problem. Like, who turned the lights out? Did Jenny say, well, I'm going to shoot Steve, boom, 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 4 times. Wait a minute. Let me save on this electric bill. Let me turn the light off before I kill myself. No, because if you're homicidal and suicidal, you're not even thinking about that. So Wayne walks in, sees the bodies, picks up a shell casing, contaminating the crime scene, throws the shell casing down, contaminating the crime scene. He says he leaves, calls. First, he says he called Robert Gaddy. Then he called Raymond White, Steve's business associate. Then he calls one of his judges, Judge Charles Robinson, who's now in federal prison. Oh, man, there's some bodies in here I left. Oh, you should go back. So he says he goes back to the crime scene. So crime scene's already contaminated by Wayne Neely. He picks up shell casings, and then supposedly Gaddy shows up at some time.
Yeah. So he calls all these people, doesn't call 911.
That
Correct.
sounds familiar.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to
Correct.
say is that you said that the apartment was both in his and Steve's name or condo.
Yeah, so the condo is in Neely and Steve's name.
So it was basically a crash pad for that.
Yes. So, speaking of, like, when you go back and listen to these interviews of, like, Jenny's former roommate, there are names like Vince Young that pop up that Vince took them to the condo a few times. There's other Titans players who were at that condo with Jenny and her roommate. So, yeah, it was a crash pad. Basically, everyone had a key to that place. It was known that this is where guys are going to go. Like, if you go back and look when Vince Young went, quote unquote, missing and Jeff Fisher's holding this press conference, they can't find him, he's suicidal, blah, blah, blah. He was at that condo at 105 Lee Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow.
So that's very interesting that he would show up there, walk through the condo, not see them. The lights are off. Like you said, how do these things happen? And then the thing is, from what we've experienced with a lot of other cases, calling a bunch of people before you call 911. Why are you calling all these people and not calling immediately? You're calling 911. Most people,
Right.
99.9% of the population is going to call 911 and be panicky because they just saw 2 dead bodies.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, if you look at it, you could probably Google map it or whatever, but where that condo is, literally, you come out of the parking lot, right across the street, there's a fire station. So even if you don't call 911, walk your ass to the fire station. Hey, there's 2 bodies in here. I don't know if they're alive. There's blood. Get help. But you're calling all of these people, and then you're leaving the crime scene that you've already contaminated.
That you've already contaminated.
And one of the things I saw that the police said, they said, well, this happens sometimes with people. People get confused when they're affected by trauma and stuff like that. But when but the fact that he called a bunch of other people, doesn't really include that. I mean, it doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And there was a total of about 45 minutes from the time Neely went in there, Gaddy shows up, before they even call 911. So you have to question what happened in those 45 minutes. Now, there's talk that certain people went in and out of that condo before they called 911 to move certain things. Don't know, wasn't there. But there's video evidence that suggests people were going in that condo before the 911 call even took place. So you have to question, okay, what the hell were you guys doing while Steve is presumably dead, right? We don't know. Yes, he was dead. But from a medical standpoint, they're not a doctor. They don't know. Like, people have been shot in the head before and survived, right? Like, why are you not giving these people help?
Why don't you call an ambulance? We just saw this on another case. Like, why don't you call an ambulance to get these people help and to make sure that they are dead? You don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know if their lives can be saved. Maybe they have. It's traumatic. It's horrible. And the poor families.
Yeah. The thing you said that there was in that 45-minute time span but before 911 was called, was it just Gaddy and Wayne that were going in and out of the house, or were there other people?
Well, Wayne says he didn't go back in. That's questionable itself. I kind of believe it simply because he left, right? But if I remember correctly, there was video showing Gaddy go in the condo. And then Gaddy, was even saying some things like, I didn't go upstairs yet. Like, well, who asked you anything about upstairs? Like, why does that matter? The bodies are not upstairs. The bodies are in the living room. So, like, what does that matter if you went upstairs? And, speaking of, like, let's think about this. There's R&B music playing upstairs. Jenny's in a bra and panty. She texts Steve if he's coming to the condo at whatever time it is. I got the phone records here in front of me. At 1-something, Steve's like, oh, I'm on the way. Well, we know what that was. On a Friday night in a bra and panties at 1:30 in the morning. We know what that was.
Even from
the music playing. Right.
The text messages, you can tell, like, it's obvious that they're having a sexual affair, a relationship, and he was coming over there to see her.
Yeah.
Didn't sound to me like, listen, when 20-year-old girls are upset and they're in a relationship and they're angry and they're upset, everybody knows about it.
Everyone knows about it. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too. My daughter's 29 years old. I remember when she was 20. I mean, sometimes she still acts like she's 20. There's no way you can convince me that the guy she's dating wouldn't know she was upset, and again, if you release certain things out of context, for instance, Sergeant Pastiglione, who was the sergeant of homicide, said, well, she texted him just 2 days before saying, I'm going to have all of you soon. So we knew that meant she was going to kill him. But if you look at the text messages leading to that text, I love you, baby. I love you too. I'm going to have all of you soon. Can't wait. I know. So we know what that was, meaning, yeah, we're about to hook up, have sex. Come on. It is what it is. But if you just say, oh, she texted him and said, I'm going to have all you soon. We knew she was going to kill him. Then, yeah, people might buy
I've
it.
never heard a death threat like that.
No.
I'm going to have all of you.
Right. You know, I want to hear the text again if it matches what their narrative is, that she was worried about this DUI and she's worried Steve was leaving and all of this other stuff. I want to see those texts because I'm at 52 years old. And if I'm mad at you, you're going to know I'm mad at you. I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm mad at you. So a 20-year-old female, I would want to see those texts. You motherfucker, I can't believe you did this. You motherfucker, you're cheating on me. You motherfucker, you left me in jail on this DUI. I'm worried about this DUI. No such thing. And the fact that they based this case on text messages, well, hell, I can show you the text message where the day she supposedly bought the gun after it got changed to fit the narrative, she's texting her friend who was supposed to hang out with her that Friday night. Oh, I'm stuck in Memphis. We can't hang out. Well, then she texts Steve at 10:15, again, phone records. I do my research. I do my investigation. Hey, babe, you want to go have drinks? Well, I'm still putting the kids to bed. Oh, okay. But this is a girl who supposedly bought a gun 4 hours before to kill this guy, asking him to go have drinks.
Yeah.
Come on.
Plus, there was just nothing in her background that would, indicate that she had a violent nature. I mean, granted, women and people do things in the crime of passion, in the heat of passion. Anything is possible. But there was nothing there in her personality, in her background. I mean, he was taking care of her financially when she needed money, whatever she needed. So it's like, why would you kill the golden goose?
But if this was a crime of passion, she would have just used the gun in the house. You don't go and buy a gun. That's premeditated, and you have to think about that.
Well, you don't buy a gun, because let's say you shoot Steve and then you freak out. The person you bought the gun from is going to collect that $100,000 reward money that they would have put up to find the killer, Steve McNair, right? So that was always bullshit. The gun sale itself is bullshit. The gun sale never happened. Now, I've talked to the same people Nashville police have, but I do it unfiltered, and I just say what they said. Like Sonia New, who was Jenny's manager that night, told me, which the same thing she told police, Jenny never let, we have to go back, right? Because originally the gun sale, they said, happened on Thursday. She got the DUI Wednesday. She bought the gun Thursday. She killed Steve Friday. Now, they based that on, and again, all they had to do was investigate, that Wednesday there was a guy who was described as about 6'2", bald head, medium complexion, talking to Jenny for a long time at the restaurant. Her manager told him, well, if he's not a customer, he has to leave. She leaves a couple hours later. She's gone for hours, he says. Oh, so Nashville police go back and ask Gilliam, was that you at the restaurant? No, it wasn't me. All they had to do was pull up the video. It was him, right? So then they say, okay, well, it wasn't Wednesday. We checked her time cards. That was Thursday. So that's the day the gun sale happened. But then they're checking phone records. No, it couldn't have been Thursday. Had to have been Friday, right? Friday, right? Yeah, Friday. Well, is it Thursday? Is it Friday? Is it Wednesday? Like, what day did she buy this supposed gun? And not only that, Gilliam's story is, I called her, told her I was outside, 6 o'clock, and she came out. I drove around in my car. I was in my Cadillac. I showed her how to work the gun. I gave it to her, and she went back inside. Well, the problem is, Sonia New said she never left Friday at 6 o'clock because she was the whatever you call the person when people first walk into the restaurant, like, how many in your party, blah, blah, blah. So she said if Jenny would have been gone for 30 seconds, I would have known it. And the second problem with that is I have an email from Opry Mill Security that reviewed surveillance video that day who says there's no such transaction of Gilliam pulling up in his Cadillac STX, Jenny walking out. Now, Opry Mills has 100-something cameras around that entire parking lot, every angle of the building. So there's no way that wouldn't have been caught on video. The third problem is if he called her and simply said, "Oh, I'm outside, come out." Well, around that time, he's talking to her for 4 minutes on the phone. That takes way too long to just say, "I'm outside, come out." And the other problem with that is, again, I have her phone records right here. I can pull it up. She's on the phone with Steve at the time she's allegedly buying this gun after they changed the time and day so many times at the exact same time. So I would really love to have seen that conversation or heard that conversation. "Hey, honey. Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm buying a gun because, you know, you're cheating on me, motherfucker, and you left me in jail, and I'm going to kill you when I get home." And outside of that, let's, for argument's sake, say she did buy the gun Friday at 6 o'clock, even though first it was Thursday, then it was Friday. Gilliam never said what day it was. It was Friday, right? Friday, right? Yeah, whatever day it was 6 o'clock. So again, phone records show she was on the phone with Steve. Phone records show he was nowhere around, because if you're in the same car with the person buying a gun, you don't need to be on the phone with her. You don't need to be texting her at the exact same time that this thing is going on. So he was never there. He never sold her the gun. But for argument's sake, say he did. Why is she even going to go back to work for the next 3.5, 4 hours? If you got the gun that you want to use to kill your boyfriend because he's leaving you, why are you going back to work? What are you going to do with the tips? What are you going to do with your salary? You know you're about to kill yourself. Fuck it. I got the gun. I'm getting in my car and I'm leaving. But the fact that the video evidence discredits the gun sale, the phone records discredit the gun sale, and you're taking the word of a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery, there was never a gun sale. The gun was Adrian Gilliam's up until the time it was found in that condo. And you know why he never came forward? Police had to find him because he knew the gun wasn't in his name. He probably thought they'll never trace it back to me. He didn't even buy the gun legally.
No, it was a hood gun. It was a hood gun. And I want to go back a little bit because we talked about Gaddy when we were in the crime scene, because I think that's really important about him, because there's crimes, you got to have a motive for your crime.
Right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about him. Tell us our audience about him and his relationship to Steve, and and lead it right up into when he arrived at the condo, because there's discrepancies about that as well.
Yeah, so Gaddy and Steve went to Alcorn together. Of course, Steve made it big in the NFL. Gaddy played for, I can't remember what they called it, not UFL, but arena football. I think it was like the Nashville Cats or something like that. So Gaddy would attach himself to Steve as his, quote, bodyguard, driver, like Ace Boone Coon, right-hand man type thing for years, right? You saw Steve, you saw Gaddy, you saw Gaddy, you saw Steve. That's just how it was. But Gaddy had ambitions of being like this club promoter, this, like, guy around the city. He owned a club called 615 that police responded to so many times for shootings, stabbings, you name it. It's closed now. Gaddy was looking to start another club that he wanted Steve to front money on. Steve's like, dude, I'm done. So, there were talks from several witnesses that knew Jenny and Steve that Gaddy had stolen $13,000 from Steve's restaurant. And if you go back and watch Gaddy's, and this is like in the weeks before the murder, if you go back and watch Gaddy's interrogation tape from that day, July 4th, 2009, he said, man, if me and Steve wouldn't have had a falling out, I would have been there. And then the detective's like, well, what was the falling out? Well, it wasn't really a falling out because he almost slipped. I wanted to start a business venture. Steve told me to wait, and we got upset with each other. Sounds like you almost slipped and said you stole $13,000 from Steve, and you guys had a falling out. But, I mean, he basically said they had a falling out. If we wouldn't have had a falling out, I would have been there. Now, this is about 2 weeks before the murders. And one of the first things Lucille McNair, Steve's mom, told me was that Steve had found out about this money. And her words to me were, Steve told me when he gets back to Nashville, I'm going to shoot that big motherfucker down in the knee to bring him down the side to whoop his ass. So Steve and Gaddy had this falling out just 2 weeks before the murder. And then all of a sudden, fast forward to July 4th, 2009, he's the one calling 911. He's the one going in that condo where Steve's body is. I don't know, not rocket science, but something you'd want to investigate.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, all right, can we go back to Jenny for a second? So how are they putting together, what was the evidence that put Jenny and Gilliam together? Because that's what I'm not understanding.
Well,
Did they have any,
say again?
did they have any evidence to
Concrete
evidence to connect Jenny to this guy Gilliam that she allegedly bought this gun from?
The only thing they have is his word, right? Because
That's
Jenny's
it.
dead, right?
Right.
Jenny's dead, so she can't, confirm or deny this story. Adrian Gilliam, when they went and interviewed him on July 5th, the very first time, which was a quick 7-minute interview in the presence of his fiance, his baby mama. Oh, I sold it to a girl. I don't even know her name. So instead of showing a 6-pack, they show him a picture. I'm going to show you a picture of Sahel Kazemi. Is this the girl you sold the gun to? Yep, that's exactly the girl I sold the gun to. Case closed, right? But then 2 weeks later, when the ATF is like, hey, so that guy was in Florida for murder and armed robbery, and we got his phone records, and oh my God, he's on her phone records, 200 and something times. Oh, we need to talk to you again. Well, I lied because my fiance was right there.
So
really?
who was he talking 200 times to?
Jenny. Like Gilliam's numbers on her cell phone records. 157 texts on her phone records from that time period, because I went and counted all of them. 157, and that one is like days after they found the body. You know why he sent that text message? Because the very first time police were at his house, the only thing they said was, we're here to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. They didn't say, and used to kill Sahel Kazemi or Jenny. They just said, we're here to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. So you know why he sent that text after she was dead and everyone knew she was dead? To say, man, if I would have texted her, I didn't know, I wouldn't have known she was dead. I didn't know. So this guy's all on her phone records, but he says he doesn't know her. But he also says, I sold the gun. So if his story, let's think about this. If his story was true, the minute Nashville PD, I keep saying BPD because I live in Baltimore now. The minute Nashville PD showed up to his house with that information, he would have said, listen, I sold it to this girl named Sahel Kazemi. I call her Jenny. You're probably going to find my number in her cell phone because of blah, 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 blah. But he lied. I don't even know her name. I don't know her. I met her one time to sell her car. Why lie if you're not involved? That makes zero sense, because if someone shows up to my house, hey, we're here to talk to you about a gun used to kill such and such. Listen, I've owned guns. I've sold guns. If the police show up to my house like, hey, remember that Glock you had? Blah, blah. Oh, yeah, I sold it to such and such. Here's the receipt, because I always, sign here. Let me get a copy of your license. That's what you do when you sell guns, right? I'm not going to lie and say, I don't even know her name. No. The story just never made sense.
Let's rewind back so the audience can understand. So Jenny and Gilliam, what was their relationship before the murder-suicide?
What do we know?
I mean, we don't know much. Again, we only have Gilliam's side of things. But me personally, looking at the time frame of the calls, and especially since he's got a fiance, baby mama that he's living with, if you look at some of the calls and texts that are 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, to me, that's usually, this is my weed man, or this is my coke man. Like, this is years before marijuana was legal. So to me, I personally think Adrian Gilliam supplied Jenny with marijuana. I mean, it's no secret she had marijuana in her system when she died. Again, does that make you a killer and a suicidal person? If that's the case, half the country would be dead right now, right?
Right.
So I believe Adrian Gilliam supplied her with marijuana, recreational drugs. Again, there's phone calls between them at 1, 2 in the morning when people are trying to get a fix, get a high. So that's what I believe. And I also believe, even though contrary to what he says, that he didn't know she was dating Steve McNair and he didn't know Steve lived in Nashville. Everybody that lived in Nashville knew Steve was there. And you see a 20-year-old driving a Cadillac Escalade one day and a Mercedes S550 the next day and all of these expensive vehicles. And you don't say, how are you getting that? Like, right. So for him to say, oh, I don't believe Steve was there, bullshit. And I'll go one even further. He and Steve went to the same church, because the same bishop that did Steve's eulogy was the same bishop at Adrian Gilliam's sentencing hearing, saying he's been an outstanding member of my church for years, blah, blah, blah. So again, we're not talking Willie Johnson. We're talking Steve McNair. So if Steve goes to your church, Steve goes to your freaking church. Don't give me that crap about you didn't know he lived in Nashville.
So he was lying about knowing Jenny, knowing Steve, all of this stuff. So how long were those text messages going on between Jenny and Gilliam?
So I have her records that date back to June 15th. Now, anything before that, I couldn't tell you, but at least in the month leading up to the murder, like Gilliam is all over her phone record, like starting June 15th. There's a 1-minute call. June 15th, there's a 1-minute call. So you're looking at almost a month of him being on her phone records, and then all of a sudden he doesn't know who she is. Like, really?
Well,
and what were those text messages?
And you don't have those text messages?
No, I don't. Nashville police do, but speaking of, I'm glad you brought that up. Gilliam claims that Jenny texted him about the gun. Where's that text message? Because if they had that text message, you know what they would do? They would show it just to shut me up. If they had the video of him coming to Dave & Buster's where she supposedly got in the car, they would show it to shut me up. You know why they haven't shown a text message like that in 16 years? Because it doesn't exist. Because if she would have texted him saying, oh, meet me for the gun, the first thing they would have done when I started speaking out about it, let's shut this guy up. Here's a text message right here. We subpoenaed the records. Let's shut him the fuck up. You know why? It doesn't exist, because everything Adrian Gilliam said besides his name was complete bullshit.
Yeah. Well, also the nature of the way they interviewed him was kind of screwed up as well. I mean, in a murder investigation, if you have someone like that, first of all, I mean, you would bring them in for questioning, number one.
Right.
You wouldn't want someone else there.
Right.
To me, it's too casual.
Right. Well, I would have said, all right, she needs to leave, or, we need to talk outside, anything. But when you have someone there and she's like, okay, what the hell is going on? And this is supposedly your fiance, baby mama. They're probably going to lie. But yes, I would have taken them to the station. I'll go one further. I wouldn't have said, I'm here to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. Here's what I would have said. I'm here to talk to you about physical evidence tying you to the scene of 2 dead bodies. Start talking. I'm not using Steve's name. I'm not saying shit. I got physical evidence tying you to 2 dead bodies. Start talking. I'm going to leave this room. I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I'm going to let him sweat and then see what he says. But They gave him every opportunity to make up some bullshit. I sold it to a girl, man. I don't even know her name. Some young lady. I got the interview tapes. I could probably quote it verbatim if I had to.
But his phone. I mean, the text messages for a month before this, you know who this person is.
And based upon the duration, it was obviously a transaction.
Yeah, 1 minute here, 1 minute there.
There was no long conversations.
There's no long conversations. Exactly. Like no long. And again, like I can, go through like phone calls at 1 or 2 in the morning. So to me, I honestly think Adrian Gilliam was supplying her weed. And who knows, maybe she owed him money that day because the day of the murder, she called her like 13 times, even while he was allegedly in the car with her selling the gun. And he texted her, I lost count. I could go back and count it if I needed to. But something happened on the day of July 3rd, leading into July 4th, that Adrian Gilliam's gun that wasn't purchased by him, by the way, ends up at the crime scene.
That's crazy. That's crazy stuff. And then Gaddy, I want to get into that, but I want to kind of save that because my biggest question is what's the relationship between Gaddy and Gilliam?
So, again, Nashville police said it was bullshit and didn't matter, and I was making up theories. But Gaddy and Gilliam both used to work at a car dealership called Nissan of Rivergate.
Yeah, you don't have to
Nissan of Rivergate. There in Nashville, close to Rivergate Mall. They both worked there as like car salesmen. So there's that connection. And then remember I mentioned Club 615. Gaddy was the club owner or whatever. Gilliam was dating a girl that played for a women's football team called the Nashville Heat. So they would always have their little parties at Club 615. And Gilliam used to want to be a concert promoter or whatever you call it, hip hop promoter. So he would have these shows at Gaddy's Club 615. So the fact that these two work together, the fact that they used to hang out at Gaddy's Club together, right there tells you they know each other. Now, you could probably argue the club, it's so big, people come in all the time. But if you work at the same car dealership with someone, you know them, right? If you go to your office and sit next to somebody every day, you know that person. Whether you like go out and hang out and have dinner together, whatever, you know that person. So again, here we are. You got one guy showing up, calling 911. You got one guy, I don't know her name, but my gun happens to be at the crime scene.
And my phone records are littered all over her phone.
Yes.
I don't know her.
Yes. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. And even Gaddy claimed to not know Jenny, but then as that interrogation went on, I wouldn't even call it interrogation. I would just call it whatever. As he goes on, he's like, yeah, I set up the deal to buy the Cadillac Escalade. Well, wait a minute. You said you didn't know her. And then he talks about how he followed her back to the condo one day because she was intoxicated and he wanted to make sure she got home okay. Well, wait a minute. You said you didn't know her. And during the 911 call, you claimed to not even know the address to the condo. But wait a minute. So how are you following her to the condo? So all of this stuff that he started slipping out, they didn't start to question like even the time frame he said he got there from his house in Hendersonville. Yeah, when Neely called me, man, I made it in 15 minutes. Impossible. I've done that drive probably 10 times in the exact same conditions, minus July 4th, which think about July 4th, how many cops would have been on the interstate, right? Because that's what they do during the holiday.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot make that in 15 minutes. Now, if you're somewhere else close to the crime scene, you can make it there in 15 minutes, but you're definitely not going to make it in 15 minutes from Hendersonville. So even that, even Mike, the detective that was in there was like, man, that's pretty quick. Yeah, man, I was doing about 120 miles an hour. No, you weren't. You can't do that speed all the way there. You would have to do that from the time you got in your car all the way there, which is impossible.
I don't know, Vincent. You bring up a lot of valid points here, and I just think that it's a crime that this hasn't really. And I know that other people have done documentaries about this. They did the Netflix on. I mean, and you were on there for like a blip, and They didn't really kind of go into all of this, and who knows, maybe they just didn't have all the information. And at that time,
they had the information because I gave it to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. Like law enforcement says one thing and they close it, and nobody's poking around, and they want to just put it to bed. Now you're disruptor. You're a disruptor because you're poking,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And when you're a disruptor, people get nervous. You're gonna get sued, whatever. So you're poking the bear, and you have evidence to prove that this stuff is not accurate. Like there's a lot of holes here.
So you brought up a good point. You've written 2 books about this. You're pretty vocal about it. Have you ever been sued by the Nashville PD?
I have not. I've been slandered by the Nashville PD. I haven't been sued. And I'm glad you mentioned the books. You notice I didn't mention them because they're not, I wouldn't say they're not important to me. They're important for the cause, right? That's the reason I wrote the books. After my first appearance on Dateline, again, it was like, there was like 58 minutes of all these other people. And I did this hour-and-a-half interview with Lester Holt laying out why this case has so many gaping holes. And it was like, this former cop says it didn't happen that way. And he says he doesn't have an axe to grind with his ex-department. Like, if that's all you show people, they're going to question it. And then I went back and looked at the comments after the show, and people were like, well, we really wanted to hear what that ex-Nashville cop had to say. So that is what spun the book. But again, I'm not in it for money. I can pull it up right now on my account. My last royalty check from Amazon was $8.28.
Yeah.
I'm not retiring on $8.28,
Exactly.
right? So when I hear people talk about, oh, he's just doing it for the books and the money and blah, blah, blah. What money? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't understand how book sales work.
Yeah, we do that to us. They do it to us all the time. And we work, there's cold cases we've been working on for like 5 years.
Yeah. And
I mean, you don't make money on these things.
No.
You're just trying to, and we get involved with the families. We want them to have some sort of resolution when we see stuff that's run afoul and it smells, and that, you know, law enforcement, for a lack of whatever reason,
right.
They like I said, they want finality. They want to bury it. The quickest they can get it off their desk and through the prosecutor's office,
exactly,
the better. That
exactly
costs them money, doesn't cost them a headache. We're dealing with that on several cases right now. But very similar.
People who, there was a dead body, young man, naked on the road. No one calls. All his friends are there. No one calls 911.
45 minutes later. So 45 minutes.
And that's what this case bothers me too. Like, if you're going to walk in, you're going to see these people, that this man that you're friends with, that you know, and you don't call 911.
And you don't call 911. Yeah, exactly. So correction, $8.46 is what I correction.
Dude, you get yourself a Starbucks.
You know, let me run the McDonald's and supersize right now, right?
Exactly.
But, you know, it kills me when I hear people say he's just doing it for the books, or you know, now he's a news anchor and reporter only because of Steve. Hell, to be honest with you, I'd rather still be in corporate America. No one knows who I am. Steve's still here. Jenny's still here. Like, if I could go back in time, yes, did this lead to other stuff? Absolutely. Did it lead to other opportunities? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I wish I didn't know Lucille McNair. I wish I didn't know Freddie McNair. I wish I didn't know Azadeh Kazemi, who's Jenny's sister. Like, I'd be totally happy not knowing any of these people. Because you know why? Because their loved ones would still be here.
Absolutely. The amount of sweat equity you put in there, you couldn't put a price tag on there. And it's like, and you wouldn't want it anyway, because it's just like, it's blood money.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's blood money. Exactly. So let me just say this to all those people that think I've made millions of dollars and I've gotten rich. $8.46.
There you go. There you go. Well, listen, we're going to continue to have you on here. I mean, obviously we're going to talk to a lot of people on this case, and we're going to try to, stir the pot a little bit, because I'm just curious. The chief of police in Nashville, is it the same person?
No. I don't know where Surpass is these days. I know he left shortly after. Actually, funny, not funny, he left shortly after I contradicted something they said and pointed out that Steve McNair's gun was available to Ginny. And then, their rebuttal was, well, it was in his truck. Okay, maybe it was in his truck, but it's listed on the crime scene report that it was found at the crime scene. And, that Ginny actually could have just used Steve's gun and not involved Adrian Gilliam if their story.
Yeah, if you're going to kill yourself, who cares what kind of gun you use?
Right. Especially when there's one right there where you don't even have to involve someone, because again, let's say she shoots Steve and then freaks out and runs out of the condo. Then Adrian Gilliam, who through his girlfriend, fiance, baby mama, could have said, hey, let's collect this reward. Just tell her, someone that's sold the gun to her, blah, blah, blah. And her name is this, and here's her phone number. Right. So it just, never made sense.
Well, the family's lucky to have you doing this and continue doing this, and we're interested in this very much. And I obviously, as for me, I mean, I was a huge fan of Steve McNair. I mean, his story, it just his NFL career is a storybook in itself, and it's just sad that a lot of the times law enforcement wants to do this. And I think a lot of it it's not nefarious. I think it's the path of least resistance sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And they just want to get it off their plate. And, they have lots of cases, but due diligence, especially someone like him, who he deserves that. And obviously you feel like he deserves that. And we're going to continue on this discussion and really find out and hopefully keep this story in the limelight.
Yeah, for sure. It's should speak volumes that 16 years later people are still talking about this, because it's something that a lot of people, when they look back, like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Like, so this 20-year-old shot this guy execution style, like, and then killed herself in a bra and panties, and it just doesn't make sense. And you also have to question too, like, why would a department like Nashville Police not release crime scene photos? They're like, oh, because Steve was a famous person. Well, guess what? You can go right now and Google Michael Jackson's crime scene photos. You're going to see Michael Jackson. Now, nothing against Steve's star power, but Michael was a much bigger star than Steve. You can still see his crime scene photos. You can see Nicole Simpson almost decapitated. So, like, just the fact that there's certain things that Baltimore police won't release should speak volumes.
I mean, Nashville, Baltimore.
Yeah, I said Baltimore again. Yeah, just like, that should speak volumes. And again, the fact that, if there was video, okay, show it to me. If there was this text message about a gun, okay, show it to me. Well, you can't come back 16 years later and say, here it is, because then people are going to say, well, we think that's bullshit. You may have just made that up. Right? So.
Yeah,
they got it under lock and key. We're dealing with that right now, trying to get crime scene photographs released and stuff, FOIAs and stuff like that. And to me, that's the first step that, they want to conceal stuff, and they're covering up some mistakes, and, and they can hide under the banner of, the law to do that. But under a closed investigation, no, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
It's adjudicated. It's done. No one was, there's no adjudication or anything like that. They made the determination right then and there. And
I think it's important to note one last thing I forgot to mention. We were talking about the gun and Adrian Gilliam. He says he was at his friend Tony Smith's house at the time of the murders. But he also said he called Jenny at 12:02. They talked for 3 minutes. It's ironic that he knew it was 3 minutes, because he knew it said his alibi, which the phone records say was 3 minutes. The problem is Tony Smith, when they talked to him, said Adrian Gilliam was not there during the time of the murders. And they're like, are you sure? Because he said you guys were making Crown and Coke. He said, yeah, that was the next day, which was that Sunday rather. That's when he went over there, because Tony Smith's a bondsman and Gilliam thought he was going to jail. So his alibi for the time of the murders was shot by the guy who supposedly was his alibi. He can't account for where he was at the time of the murders. And he was the last person to call her an hour and a half before the murder. And he even told police, well, did you know where she was? Yeah, she told me she was down on 2nd Ave. That's where the condo is. So he knew where she was. It's his gun. He's not accounted for the time of the murders, but he didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, Vincent, we'll be talking to you again. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've done amazing work. And then, people out there, he's got his books out there. So if you're interested in this case, please go look up Vincent Hill, look up his books, because we're just scratching the surface, and he's done all this amazing work. And just want to get it out there. I mean, this is a case that should be relooked at. Definitely should be relooked at. And,
for sure.
For his family, they want closure. They want to know what happened to him. That's the thing people don't understand. It's like, fine, law enforcement wraps it up in a bow, but this is a person that had a family that loved him, and they're not going to rest until they know exactly what happened to him. I wouldn't if it was my child or my, or my relative or my loved one. I would want to know, and that's why they hang on to it, because they know in their gut doesn't feel right.
Yeah, well, there's two families, right? And I made promises to both families, like the McNair and the Kazemi family, because if you look at it from their side, like they were receiving death threats. Oh, your sister is a murderer. Oh my gosh! Like, so they still need to clear Jenny's name as a murderer, right? So there's so much wrongdoing to both families.
Do you still talk to them, Jenny's family?
I actually just talked to Azadeh back on July 4th. Obviously, I messaged her on Facebook to just let her know, hey, I was thinking about you, and she responded. She's doing well. She says trying to move on, obviously. But yeah, every once in a while, we'll talk to Azadeh and just to see how she's doing. So.
Well, it's a tragic loss for both families, and it's a tragic loss, obviously, for pretty much any football or NFL fans, because he was an amazing player and an amazing person. Obviously he was human, and things happen. But anyway, Vincent, thank you, and then stay on. And just want to talk to you off for a second.